I was standing by the dessert table at my brother's wedding, holding a tray of cake slices when I heard someone laugh. At first, I thought they were laughing at a joke. I smiled without thinking, ready to hand out more plates, until I heard Madeline's voice rise over the music. "She looks like the waitress," she said, pointing right at me. The guests around her burst out laughing. Jasper, my brother, chuckled along like it was harmless. I felt the heat rush up my neck. I laughed too, out of instinct, pretending it didn't sting. I looked down at my plain dress, my scuffed shoes, my hands trembling just a little. I kept moving, placing slices on white china plates, feeling smaller with every step. Across the room, my son Liam was watching me. His little face, usually so open and sweet, was pinched tight, his jaw set. Before I could even blink, I saw him weave through the crowd toward the DJ booth. I felt panic rise in my chest. I started to move after him, balancing the tray in my hands, calling his name softly. He reached the microphone just as the music faded between songs. Liam grabbed the mic with both hands, lifted it to his mouth, and said in a voice that didn't shake once, "Actually, she paid for this wedding." The entire room went silent. The laughter died like someone had cut the strings off a puppet show. Every face turned toward him, then toward me. And in that frozen second, I watched Madeline's smile fall away, like a mask slipping off. If you had asked me that morning how I felt about the wedding, I would have said I was proud. Exhausted, yes. Nerves buzzing, absolutely. But mostly proud. My little brother Jasper was getting married. It didn't matter that I had been the one meeting vendors, paying overdue deposits, smoothing out last-minute crises when checks bounced. It didn't matter that my own name would never show up on the thank you cards. I told myself family didn't keep score. Love meant you showed up. I had worked a double shift the day before at the diner, then stayed up half the night steaming Jasper's tuxedo and sewing a tear in the bridesmaid dress. Madeline had ordered 2 sizes too small for one of her friends. My hands were still sore when I slipped into my dress that morning. A simple navy blue A-line I had found on clearance last year, never imagining it would someday serve as my best wedding outfit. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, dabbed on a little mascara, and told myself it didn't matter if no one noticed me. This was Jasper's day. The reception was held in a sprawling white tent on the lawn of Madeline's family estate. Fairy lights hung overhead like stars caught in a net. A jazz band played soft, elegant music, while waiters in black and white uniforms floated between guests carrying silver trays of champagne. Everywhere I looked, there were crisp linens, polished glassware, towering centerpieces dripping in roses and crystals. It was beautiful. Just like Madeline had dreamed, Jasper looked good. Nervous, but good. He caught my eye once during the photos and gave me a little wink. It was the same grin he used to give me when we were kids, sneaking cookies from the kitchen after bedtime. I smiled back and gave him a thumbs up. Whatever differences had grown between us over the years, today wasn't the day to dwell on them. Liam stood beside me, fidgeting with the cuffs of his little suit jacket. He hated dressing up, but he hadn't complained once. He knew how important this day was for Uncle Jasper. He knew how much work his mom had put into making it happen. "You doing okay?" I asked him, squeezing his shoulder gently. He nodded but didn't say anything. His eyes were scanning the crowd, wary and a little overwhelmed. "Look at all this," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "Fancy, huh?" Liam shrugged. "Looks expensive." I laughed under my breath and ruffled his hair. "Don't worry about that. It's not our job to worry today." It wasn't a lie, exactly. It was just a hope. I didn't want Liam carrying the weight I had carried for so long. The afternoon drifted on in a blur of speeches and toasts, the sun dipping lower, casting everything in soft gold. I stayed mostly on the sidelines, helping where I could, slipping into the background when the official photographers came around. It wasn't about me. It never had been. When the wedding planner came rushing up, looking frantic and sweaty, asking if someone could help serve the cake because one of the catering staff had quit mid-shift, I didn't hesitate. I set down my glass, took the serving knife, and got to work. It wasn't glamorous, but it needed to be done. That was what I was good at, seeing the gaps and quietly filling them. I balanced plates of cake up and down the tables, offering smiles and polite congratulations, trying not to notice when people looked right through me. It wasn't personal, I told myself. They just didn't know me. I didn't see Madeline coming until she was right beside me, her voice carrying clear over the buzz of conversation. "She looks like the waitress," she said, laughing as she pointed at me, like it was the funniest thing in the world. The guests around her laughed too. Some of them looked uncomfortable, but most just laughed because that was what you did when the bride made a joke. I smiled because that was what you did when you were raised to believe making a scene was worse than being humiliated. I kept serving. My hands trembled a little, but I kept smiling. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself this was Jasper's day. I could survive anything for one more afternoon. But across the room, Liam's face was changing. His cheeks flushed bright red, his small fists clenching at his sides. I saw him look at me, then at the stage, then back at me. Something was building inside him, something fierce and unstoppable. Before I could move, before I could shake my head or tell him to stay put, he was already slipping through the tables toward the DJ booth, and I knew in that instant that everything was about to change. I set the empty tray down behind the dessert table and wiped my hands on a napkin, trying to catch my breath. My cheeks burned. Every nerve in my body felt exposed, like I had walked straight into a fire I had no way to escape. I told myself to shrug it off. A joke was just a joke. This day wasn't about me. I repeated the words in my head like a prayer, but when I looked up, I saw Liam moving faster now, weaving between guests, his little jaw set with a determination that scared me. His brown eyes, so much like mine, flashed with a fury I had never seen from him before. I started to move toward him, whispering his name, willing him to stop. He glanced back once and then kept going, straight for the DJ table where a microphone rested unattended. The band had just finished a song, the room buzzing with chatter and the clinking of glasses, the perfect cover for him to slip in unnoticed. My heart hammered in my chest as I quickened my pace. I had no idea what he was planning, but I knew Liam. He was quiet, observant, but when he believed something was wrong, he acted with a boldness that caught people off guard. He had been raised watching me smooth over insults, absorb slights, stay silent to keep the peace. Maybe he had learned something different about when it was time to speak. I reached him just as his fingers curled around the microphone. "Liam," I said sharply under my breath, "stop." He turned and looked at me, and there was no fear in his face, only conviction. The kind of conviction I had long since buried under years of telling myself it was easier not to make waves. "They need to know," he said, his voice steady. Before I could say another word, he turned back and lifted the microphone to his mouth. The speakers squealed slightly, catching everyone's attention. Conversations broke off mid-sentence. Heads turned. The buzz of the room evaporated into a heavy, curious silence. Standing there in his little suit, hair sticking up in the back from where I had tried to flatten it earlier, Liam looked impossibly small and impossibly brave. My hands shook at my sides, part of me wanting to yank him away, the other part frozen by something deeper: pride, fear, hope. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice loud and clear, "I just want to say something real quick." A few chuckles from the crowd. Some guests leaned in, expecting a cute kid moment. Maybe a funny story about Uncle Jasper. Madeline, standing at the head table in her shimmering white gown, smiled indulgently, clearly expecting the same. I watched Liam take a deep breath, the microphone shaking just slightly in his hand. "My mom isn't the waitress," he said. A murmur rippled through the room. "And she's not just here to serve you cake," he continued. His voice rose slightly, filled with something raw and shaking. The guests shifted in their seats. Some looked uncomfortable now, others curious, others frowning as if they were only just realizing who I was. Liam swallowed hard and finished, "Actually, she paid for this wedding." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. No music, no clinking glasses, just stunned, breathless stillness. I stood there, every part of me aching. I wanted to pull him off the stage. I wanted to wrap him in my arms. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. I didn't know which urge was stronger. At the head table, Madeline's face froze. Her hand, halfway to lifting a champagne flute, hovered midair. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking pale and almost translucent under the fairy lights. Jasper turned sharply toward me, his expression wild, confused, guilty all at once. I saw the guest's eyes flick from Liam to me, then back again. Some looked embarrassed. A few looked ashamed. A handful looked impressed, like maybe they were seeing me for the first time all night. Liam lowered the microphone carefully onto the table, then looked at me. His face was calm, steady. He hadn't done it for applause. He hadn't done it for drama. He had done it because he saw something wrong and he wanted to set it right. I stood frozen for a beat, then found my feet moving toward him. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it hard. He squeezed back, small, but fierce. Behind me, voices began to rise again, low and awkward at first. I heard the scrape of chairs, the clearing of throats. The world, stunned for a moment, began to spin forward again, but nothing was quite the same. The crack had already formed. The perfect shell of the day was broken, and there, standing hand in hand with my son, I realized something had shifted inside me too, something I hadn't even known I needed. I wasn't invisible anymore. For a moment, I stood rooted to the spot, holding Liam's hand in mine, feeling the whole weight of the room press down on us. Whispers darted through the tables like insects. I heard my name pass from one set of lips to another, some saying it with surprise, others with pity, a few with something close to admiration. I thought about running. I thought about gathering Liam in my arms and slipping out the side of the tent, escaping before anyone could say anything, before they could turn their attention back toward me with questions and judgments and apologies I was too tired to accept. But then I looked down at Liam. His small fingers wrapped around mine with a strength that steadied me. His face was calm, his shoulders straight, as if he had no doubt at all that he had done the right thing. I realized that if I ran now, I would be teaching him something dangerous. I would be telling him that speaking the truth meant shame, that standing up for someone you love should be followed by retreat and silence. I had spent so many years telling myself it was noble to keep my head down, to swallow pride in the name of family, but standing there beside my son, I saw it differently. Silence hadn't made anything better. It had only made it easier for people to forget what I had done for them. I squeezed his hand, feeling something click into place inside me. A decision made without anger, without bitterness, but with a quiet certainty I had never let myself feel before. I was not going to run. I straightened my spine and lifted my chin. I looked across the tent to where Jasper was standing. His face was pale, his mouth tight, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. I could see the war going on inside him. He wanted to defend me, but he didn't know how. He wanted to smooth it over without having to face the truth of it. Our eyes met across the distance. For a second, he looked like the little boy who used to follow me around the backyard with a toy sword, swearing he would protect me from monsters. Now it was my turn to protect something, my dignity, my son's belief that telling the truth mattered. I stepped forward, walking with Liam toward the center of the tent. I could feel eyes following us, the weight of 100 gazes. I didn't falter. Liam walked half a step ahead of me, like he was leading the charge. When we reached the center, Jasper stepped toward us, his face stricken. "Alara," he said, his voice low, rough with guilt. I didn't know he was going to say anything. I looked at him steadily. Maybe he shouldn't have had to. Madeline stood a few feet behind him, stiff and silent, her hands clutching the sides of her dress. She avoided my gaze, pretending to fiddle with her bouquet. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I simply reached down, adjusted the strap of my purse on my shoulder, and said clearly enough for the nearest tables to hear, "Congratulations on your marriage. I hope it brings you all the joy you're looking for." There was no malice in my voice, just a kind of weary grace that made a few people glance away, ashamed. I turned to Liam. "Ready to go, buddy?" He nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Not from sadness, but from the enormity of the moment. As we started toward the exit, I heard Jasper call my name again. I stopped, but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "You deserved better." For a second, I considered looking back, but then I thought about all the times I had waited for that apology, hoped for it, imagined it would change something fundamental between us. Now that it had come, it felt almost beside the point. I had already changed. I didn't need his words to validate what I knew now. Without a word, I pushed open the tent flap and stepped into the cool evening air, Liam's hand warm in mine. The sky above was wide and clear, the stars just starting to prick through the darkening blue. The night smelled like fresh-cut grass and something sweet, maybe the last traces of wedding cake drifting into the air. We walked to the car together in silence. Not the heavy silence of shame or anger, but something lighter, something stronger. Inside me, a quiet fire had been lit. Not the raging, destructive kind, but a steady flame that would not go out again. I knew who I was. I knew what I had done. And I knew what I would no longer accept. I had spent so long thinking I had to stay small to keep peace, to keep love. But peace built on silence is not real peace. And love that needs you to be invisible is not real love. Not anymore. Not for me. Not for Liam. The cool air wrapped around me as Liam and I stepped away from the tent, the music behind us growing softer with every step. I unlocked the car, and he climbed into the back seat, still holding his small shoulders straight, still looking like he was ready to take on the world if he had to. I stood there for a moment, one hand on the door handle, breathing in the night. I could have gotten in. I could have driven away and left it all behind. But something in me hesitated. A lifetime of swallowing my pride had made walking away feel like the only choice. Tonight felt different. Before I could talk myself out of it, I turned back toward the tent. Through the open flaps, I could see the guests beginning to scatter. Some were pretending nothing had happened, diving back into their conversations and laughter. Others stood in small groups, casting glances toward the empty spot where Liam had made his announcement. A few people looked toward me, quickly looking away when they realized they had been caught staring. Jasper stood near the entrance, his hands jammed into his pockets, his face twisted with regret. When he saw me coming, he straightened, taking a few hesitant steps forward. "I was looking for you," he said. "I was right here," I answered, my voice even. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then tried once more. "Can we talk?" I glanced back at the car where Liam sat watching us through the window, his forehead pressed lightly against the glass. I nodded once, curt and firm. I didn't owe him my time, but for the brother who once tied a blanket around his neck and called himself my protector, I would listen. We stepped a little away from the entrance, just far enough that we could speak without the whole wedding listening in. "You didn't have to do all that," Jasper said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe not," I said, "but I did." He looked down at the ground. "I should have thanked you. I should have defended you when Maddie said what she did. I just froze. I thought it would be easier to laugh it off." "Easier for who?" I asked. He winced. "For me, I guess." For the first time all night, I saw it land. The realization of what his silence had cost. Not just my dignity, but his own understanding of who he was supposed to be. "I thought keeping it quiet was what you wanted," he said. "You never asked for recognition?" "I never asked because I didn't want to make you feel bad," I said, "because it was a gift, not a debt. But a gift doesn't mean you get to pretend the person who gave it doesn't exist." He nodded slowly, his eyes glassy under the soft lights strung across the lawn. "I don't know how to fix it," he said. "You start by not letting people laugh at the ones who love you most," I said. "You start by not being afraid to tell the truth." We stood there in the night, two siblings who had spent a lifetime orbiting around old hurts and unspoken words. It wasn't everything I needed, but it was more than I had expected. Behind him, I caught sight of Madeline standing stiffly by the dance floor, surrounded by a few of her friends. She kept glancing over her shoulder at us, her mouth tight. I felt no urge to go to her. Her silence tonight had spoken louder than anything she could have said now. "I'm sorry, Alara," Jasper said again, his voice raw. "I believe you," I said, "but you need to be better. For yourself, for her, and for me." He nodded once, a deep, slow movement that seemed to cost him something. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet bag. "I was going to give you this after the honeymoon," he said, holding it out. "But maybe it's better now." I hesitated, then took it. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a small sapphire stone, my birthstone. Not flashy, not expensive, just something that said he remembered. Thank you, I said, my voice catching for the first time all night. We stood there a moment longer, and then I turned back toward the car. I had said what I needed to say. I had stayed not because I had to, but because I chose to. When I opened the car door, Liam beamed at me like I had just won a battle neither of us had dared to name. "Ready, buddy?" I asked. He nodded so hard his hair flopped over his forehead. "Ready." As we pulled away from the estate, the lights of the wedding fading behind us, I felt something lift off my shoulders. Not the memory of what had been said or done, but the weight of all the times I had stayed silent when I should have stood tall. Tonight, thanks to a boy who had more courage in his small hands than I had carried for years, I had remembered how, and I would not forget again. The highway stretched out ahead of us, dark and endless, broken only by the occasional blur of headlights passing in the opposite lane. Liam had kicked off his shoes and curled up in the back seat, humming softly to himself as he stared out the window. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting lightly on my lap, my thumb absently brushing the small velvet bag that now lived in my coat pocket. I thought the sadness would come once we pulled away from the estate. I thought regret would find me. That had always been the pattern. Stay silent, swallow the hurt, drive home with a tight chest and a head full of words I wished I had said. But tonight was different. There was no sadness sitting in the car with us. Only a quiet, steady peace. Liam shifted, sitting up straighter, his voice breaking the silence between us. "Did I get you in trouble?" he asked, his tone unsure now that the adrenaline had worn off. I glanced at him through the rear-view mirror, meeting his worried eyes. "No," I said. "You reminded me who I am. You did exactly what I needed." He smiled, small but real, and leaned back against the seat. The truth was, for so long I had worn my invisibility like armor. I thought if I was helpful enough, agreeable enough, easy enough, I would earn a place where I belonged. But belonging bought with silence and sacrifice is fragile. It crumbles the first time you ask for more. It vanishes the moment you need to be seen as more than useful. Watching Liam stand up for me, without hesitation, had cracked something open inside me. It was not about pride or anger. It was about dignity, about finally claiming the right to be visible without apology. The memory of the wedding already felt distant, like a chapter that had ended before I realized I had turned the page. Madeline's frozen expression, the stunned faces of the guests, Jasper's shame. They would all return to their lives, their small dramas and celebrations. But I had walked away different, stronger, clearer. I knew there would be whispers, family members trying to smooth things over, apologies tucked into awkward conversations, invitations extended with careful smiles. Some bridges might burn whether I wanted them to or not. I had made peace with that. Some bridges are meant to burn, so you never forget to choose yourself next time. I flicked on the radio, low enough that it filled the car with a soft hum but not so loud that it interrupted the stillness between us. Liam closed his eyes, his breathing evening out, the tension finally leaving his small body. As the miles rolled by, I thought about what kind of example I wanted to be for him. I had always believed protecting him meant shielding him from conflict. Now I understood that real protection meant showing him how to walk into a room and know you belong there, no matter who tries to tell you otherwise. It meant teaching him that kindness does not require silence, and that loving someone never means making yourself small. When I pulled into our driveway, the porch light was still on, casting a soft glow over the cracked steps and peeling paint. It was not a mansion like Madeline's family estate, but it was ours. It was built on late nights and early mornings, on sacrifices and dreams, stitched together with more hope than money. I parked the car and turned off the engine. For a moment, I sat there, watching the rise and fall of Liam's chest, letting gratitude settle over me like a blanket. Gratitude for the boy who had seen me. Gratitude for the voice I had finally reclaimed. Gratitude for the quiet certainty that from now on, things would be different. I opened the door, stepping into the crisp night air. Liam stirred, blinking sleepily as I unbuckled him. "Come on, buddy," I said, my voice soft. "We're home." He slipped his hand into mine without hesitation, just like he had done on the dance floor, just like he had done when he grabbed that microphone. As we climbed the steps together, I realized something simple and profound. I had spent so long fighting to be part of other people's celebrations, waiting for an invitation to be seen, to matter. But tonight I understood. I did not need permission to matter. I always had, and I always would, and that was enough. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or even if it reminded you of your own strength, I would love it if you showed some love back. Please like the video if it meant something to you. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Leave a comment below and tell me your story. I read everyone, and they truly mean the world to me. And if you want more real stories about finding strength, family, and standing up for yourself, hit that subscribe button and join this community. Thank you for spending a little time with me today. Stay strong, stay kind, and always remember, you don't need permission to matter.